Hi everyone, it's Ross Anderson here, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Global Fine Wine video and podcast series. Now, these episodes are intended to inform, educate, and entertain you on all things wine and bring you the stories about the people behind some of the very best wines in the world. So please be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your wine-loving friends. Now, today's guest is Anna Flowerday, owner and co-winemaker of Te Whare Ra Wines in Marlborough, New Zealand. Now, I've been practicing that all afternoon just to make sure I got it right. TWR is the oldest small winery in Marlborough and home to the oldest vines in the region. The estate grows 7 different varieties with perhaps an Alsatian slant or influence in what they do. Now, together with husband Jason, this team places a very strong focus on organic and biodynamic principles in their winemaking and employs minimal intervention in the end result. I'm joined today by Anna from Marlborough in New Zealand. Hello, Anna. How are you?
Hey, nice to see you. Nice to see you. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us on this Friday afternoon. I believe the weather's lovely in Marlborough and it's still wet and rainy here in Sydney, but that is what it is at the moment.
Yes, the weather is one thing we cannot control, amongst other things. So we're just going to roll with it.
You were saying there's quite a deluge there a couple of weeks ago and everything's looking green again.
Very much so. Yeah, I don't think I've ever, I've been here nearly 19 years now and I've never seen Marlborough look this green at harvest. Normally the only green things are the vines and, the grass is all dead and dried up and the Wither Hills look very dry and whatever. But now it's all got a real big tinge of green again because we had about 200 mils really over the space of a week, sort of in mid-Feb. So, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So, Annie, you say you've been in Marlborough for 19 years?
Just about, yeah. So Jason, he's from here, but we took over Te Whare Ra in 2003. So, it's been a long time.
So, important question, obviously, to kick everything off with. Are you still a Wallaby supporter or are you an All Black supporter?
I will clarify that by saying I'm an All Black supporter as long as they're not playing the Wallabies, but I am a diehard Wallaby tragic, as anyone who follows me on social media will know, because it's been pretty hard to be a Wallaby supporter living in New Zealand for the last 18 years. There's not been a lot of exciting moments. I've become pretty good at copping it on the chin, but I still have an Aussie passport, so no, I am still a Wallaby supporter.
You sound a bit like me. I'm still an avid Springbok supporter, but I do support the Wallabies as long as they're not playing the Springboks. Anna, let's get on to some questions. Tell us a little bit about your personal story. How did it start off, and who is Anna Flowerday?
Yeah, I guess that's a bit of an interesting one. So I grew up in the Claren Vale. My family are pretty much all wine growers on my mum's side of the family. My grandparents and I've got another aunt and uncle in the King Valley in Victoria. And on mum's side of the family, it goes back about 6 generations. So my great-something granddad first had a vineyard in McLaren Vale in about 1854. So it's, kind of come down mum's side of the family. But the first winemaker in the family and not from a big family dynasty of a big company, but always been wine growers and wine lovers. So I kind of loved science at school, thought, well, I'll do something in that field, wasn't exactly sure what, and then got to university and kind of loved biochemistry and microbiology. And then I was actually working in a really great restaurant in Adelaide called the Red Ochre Grill that some OGs might remember. But we had an amazing manager and he just loved wine and his love of wine was really infectious. And he, would always share us interesting wines. And I was like, this is a bit more exciting than kind of spending my life in the lab. So I thought, well, about halfway through my degree, I transferred out of the kind of just normal science into enology. So, and then I worked for Hardy's for about 7 years out of uni and kind of towards the end of uni as well. Firstly at Tintara in McLaren Vale with Steve Pannell, and then at Leasingham in the Clare with Kerry Thompson. So pretty good crew of people to kind of work with and learn with and all that kind of thing. And then met Jason, who's a Kiwi and also a winemaker. And we met doing harvest together, the old vintage romance. And he stayed with me in Australia for a few years. We had our own little vineyard in the Clare. And then we were sort of umming and ahhing about doing our own thing. And we heard that Te Whare Ra was for sale. And we just loved everything about it. The history, the provenance, the size, the location, the fact that it had a big range of varieties, I guess is something I bang on about a lot, is Marlborough's not just a one-trick pony. And yeah, it it's like the old house that you kind of fall in love with that needs a bit of TLC to bring it back to life again. We kind of bought the winery and vineyard version of that. So yeah, nearly 19 years later and 2 sets of twins, we're still here, and most of the time we're still talking to each other, so it's all good. Oh, I can't hear you, Ross.
Do that. Is that better?
Yeah, perfect. Sorry, I
What
must have been
happened
talking too long. I decided to mute you.
As I say, it's been a very challenging tech week for me, but we're on top of things again. Sorry about that. The question was, how did you and Jason come to own Te Whare Ra? I mean, how do you find out about a vineyard like that is for sale? And you're in Australia, and this is in New Zealand. Did you have your feelers out? Were you looking at that already? I mean, if you said you had a little site you were working in South Australia, were you making wines under a label at that stage as well? I mean,
No, we weren't. We just had our own vineyard in Watervale, and we were selling the fruit and kind of redeveloping the vineyard. So we actually used to sell the Riesling fruit back to Te Whare Ra. So a bit of a family connection there. They're my grandparents' next door neighbours. And yeah, so we'd planted Syrah and done a lot of things, and sort of it was basically a weekend hobby job. We sort of fitted in the vineyard around our own jobs working for other people. But yeah, the draw was kind of, I guess it was a bit of an interesting time in the early 2000s. You know, the Aussie wine industry was hitting quite a difficult period. There was a lot of oversupply and things were starting to bite a bit, and people were going out of business and stuff wasn't getting picked and things like that. So I guess the writing was on the wall that maybe if we were going to leave our paying jobs and get in debt up to our eyeballs with our own place, that maybe, you know, and I've been to Marlborough enough to know I just loved it here. Jason's from Marlborough. My parents-in-law are in the industry here, and my brother-in-law. So they have a big vineyard contracting business, and my father-in-law helped a lot of people establish vineyards in Marlborough. So they were our kind of ears to the ground, and they actually just rang up and said, oh, we heard a whisper that, you know, Te Whare Ra might be for sale. We'll get a bit of the info and send it through to you guys and, you know, see what you think. So it's quite funny thinking about it now, but I'd been away on a trip overseas with Hardy's to Vinexpo, and I flew back into Melbourne, and Jason picked me up there, and we decided to drive back to Adelaide, you know, through the Grampians and make a long weekend out of it. And basically he had all the info with him. His mum had sent it over, and we sort of read it all and went through it all in this car journey and sort of the long weekend back to Adelaide. And sort of by the time we got back, we're like, hell yeah, let's do it. So I hadn't actually I'd driven past the vineyard once or twice when I'd been here with him, but essentially just bought it on the bare bones of knowing what it is, knowing the reputation of it, wow. You know, having had some of the wines from there before. But yeah. Wow.
And no regrets, absolutely.
No.
Can you give us the highlights reel then of the past 20 years or 19 years of your career?
Yeah, wow. I guess a lot of different things. I really loved my time at Hardy's. I feel like as a young winemaker, like straight out of Roseworthy, it was a great place to learn a lot really fast. You know, we got to work with some amazing fruit from all over the country, from, you know, cool climate to warm climate. We were taking stuff from obviously Tassie and Yarra and whatever. And I worked with some great people that really taught me a lot. So I feel like it was a great sort of learning curve there. And then since we've been here, I guess we have had some pretty proud moments. There's a New Zealand wine writer who unfortunately is no longer with us, who was very well respected, called Raymond Chan. And in 2014, Jason and I won New Zealand Winery of the Year. And it's the first time I'd ever gone to Marlborough, because it was a very kind of quality focused, a bit like what you guys do. It was the best of the best. And it was recognizing like that you're not good at just one thing, that you're great across the board and you consistently do that. And I guess especially for about the first 10 years here, it was kind of head down, bum up. You know what I mean? It was sort of, you felt like, why are we doing it all by hand still? You know, we pick everything by hand, all this. You feel like sometimes you think, oh, especially if you see other people, you know, having success with just volume, you know, you're like, did we do it right? But I think our heart is very much, you know, it's a wine company owned and run by 2 winemakers. Our whole agenda is making great wine. So that event, that award meant a lot to us. And then I guess there's been a few, you know, a lot of other sort of accolades individually to follow. Jason, my other one, my proud wifey moment is Jason was named New Zealand Viticulturalist of the Year with Gourmet Traveller in 2020. So that was a really nice kind of recognition as well too, because he hasn't only poured so much into converting our property to organic, and, you know, he's a bit unusual, I guess, in the new world, in that he's a winemaker that also has that skill to run the vineyard. You know, that's very common obviously in Europe. He is that vigneron thing. Whereas I've always been, I guess, more of a pure winemaker, whereas Jace really crosses both of those. So that was something else that meant a lot to both of us too. And as I said, every time we get something, it's so important. I guess our team, we share it with everybody because it's all the little, we talk about them being the 1%ers, but it's that extra care that you took on that day with making sure that vine didn't have too many bunches on it, or, hand picking things and then hand sorting it so we can make wines really naturally. And, it's just every little detail. We have a quote written on the winery wall, which is actually from Marco Pierre White. And it says, perfection is a lot of small things done well. And I guess that's that's the mantra. So anything we get really puts paid to all that work that we put in, that, it's wonderful when people notice the difference.
Absolutely. Anna, let's have a look at Te Whare Ra. I've got a few images I'm going to pop up on the screen quickly, and maybe you can just guide us through. I'm particularly interested in this one. This is the entrance, I'm assuming, to the...
That's the front gate, yep. So big Macrocarpa fence, and the hills behind are the Richmond Ranges, which on the other side of those is Nelson. So they are quite significant, obviously, because that's what kind of everybody saw as that Marlborough image on the Cloudy Bay label. So that's the front gate.
And if we have a look at some satellite shots, so here's New Zealand, North and South Island, and the red pin in the middle is Renwick, and we're just going to zoom in on that. So Marlborough Sounds, beautiful part of the world. I haven't been, but I've seen many photos, and I have lots of friends that have done that trip. So that's definitely on the agenda. We keep zooming in. Yeah, keep zooming in. What is the distance? So we've got Renwick with the little red pin. How far away are you from the coastline there?
Well, we're about 10 minutes from Blenheim, and then they're about 10, 15 minutes from the coast. So probably realistically to get to the beach, or, that coastline there, which is Cloudy Bay, actually that's the bay, it's probably 25 minutes. Yeah, right. So we're quite a way inland. So we're in the Wairau Valley, which is, we're starting to talk about sub-regions a little bit more in Marlborough now, because, 40 years down the track, we've learnt some things about why they're different. So, so Renwick's inland from Blenheim, about 10 minutes. The Marlborough Airport is in between the two places, so we're about 5 minutes from the airport. For anyone who's flying in or wants to fly in later in the year, you are more than welcome. We would love to see you back.
Absolutely.
But you can kind of get a bit of an idea there of the different sub-regions. So, so we're just literally on the boundary of the Renwick township. So,
So is this prime Marlborough real estate, all this that you can see in this slide here, is this a viticultural heartland?
It is very much so. So Marlborough's kind of, I might be slightly wrong with these stats, but they're pretty up to date. We're up to about 30,000 hectares of vines planted here. And I think that says a lot about how well suited Marlborough is to growing wine of any kind, because, nowhere in the world has become so famous so fast. And obviously it's for a different white variety than what we're going to be talking about today. But it actually amazes me that only worked out, 40 years ago that you could grow wine here, because I feel like Marlborough, like if I had my perfect list as a grape growing region, Marlborough ticks probably 9 of the 10 out of those boxes. The 10th one being that beach is not sandy. That's my only disclaimer problem with the place. That we get these beautiful long sunshine hours. We get enough rain, not too much. We're on the east coast, so it's quite a dry part of New Zealand. Similar rainfall to the Adelaide Hills or something like that, really. Amazing soil types and quite diverse soil types, depending on what you want to grow. There's options there. Beautiful climate, really gentle climate. And I think it's that consistency that probably helped Marlborough get to where it's got to today, because it's just that consistently great climate for growing wine.
So here's the fourth slide in the series, and this is your estate or your site, which is bounded by the trees.
Yes, so all of the green bit you can see is ours. So I guess the organic vineyards particularly stand out that time of the year, because obviously we haven't sprayed anything with any herbicide, so we kind of glow green. But on the left-hand side is the front road, and that little angle on the bottom corner is where the front driveway is, where you saw that sign before. Yep. So the property is broken up into 3 different blocks. That big block as you come down the driveway is our original planting, and that's where we have our really old vines. So we've got Gewurz and some Riesling and also some Chardonnay that were planted in 1979. And like you were saying in the intro, it's the oldest vines in Marlborough. And then we've got another block next to the winery and then another block out the back. So the whole property is about 14 hectares, and we've got about 11 under vine. So, but 7 different varieties, yeah.
So I'm just popping up a few vineyard shots here while we're talking as well. I mean, look at that. That's spectacular. What are the hills in the background of that one?
So that's looking from the opposite direction. So they're the Wither Hills there. So that's looking south, basically, not quite exactly due south, but yeah, pretty much. So that's looking as if you were looking down the South Island towards Christchurch and whatnot. So that's the sort of drier side of Marlborough. And so on the other side of the Wither Hills is the Awatedi Valley, which is the other main subregion.
So something I meant to ask, and I didn't want to interrupt you when you're talking about Marlborough not being a one-trick pony, and you grow 7 varieties, I believe it is, on your site. What's happening with alternate varieties in Marlborough? So the Gruner Veltliners and the Blaufränkisch and things like that. Is there even a movement for those kind of things in that area?
It is happening. I guess the sort of alternates were probably, more the aromatic whites. Riesling and Gewurz are definitely in the minority behind Sauvignon and Chardonnay and Pinot Gris. There is a bit of Gruner planted here. There's a bit of Albarino planted here. That they're two that I guess have really, there's a number of people making them. There's a teensy bit of Chenin for you, Ross, for
Nice.
your motherland. There's a bit of Pinot Blanc. There's I guess in the red space, it's mainly Pinot and Syrah, a little teensy bit of Syrah, but Pinot being by far the most. But again, there's a little bit of Montepulciano. You've got producers like Herzogs, who, they're growing 24 different things. So there's definitely some interesting stuff happening in that space. And I think we're all very mindful too that as climate change, bears down on us more and more, that we need to be thinking really carefully about what works. And obviously that evolution started to happen in South Australia when you look at Fiano, Aglianico, all that cool stuff. Yeah. And the things that new varieties that Chalmers have been bringing in and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely in people's mindset, I think, now as perhaps some of those original vineyards are replanted. I think the bulk of it probably will still be Sauvignon because, you'd be crazy if you didn't, especially if you're a contract grower. But definitely in the winery space, there's some interesting other things happening. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm hearing it everywhere. I talk to a lot of local guys and we look at what's happening in the hills with Art Wine and Handorf Hill and Gruner, Blaufränkisch all coming through, Montepulciano, etc. And then you talk to guys in Tassie and all the vineyards are being bought up and they're talking about planting Syrah. It's like, wow, Tassie and Syrah, here we go. So I was just curious, what's happening in New Zealand. It might be happening a bit slower, but I definitely think it's probably going to be something that'll evolve over the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
So here's a shot of the team, the crew. Are these all, apart from you and Jason, are these the cellar hands?
Pretty much. That's a shot at vintage time. So that's the biggest it gets. So basically, it's Jason and myself, and then we've got Benji, who's on the side where the dogs are. So he's kind of our assistant winemaker. And then we have another guy, Andrea, who's with us for vintage. And then we have Lucy, who does admin logistics with me. So most year round, it's just 5 of us. And then there's kind of 1 or 2 extras at harvest. Thankfully, our kids are in the phase where they're a little bit more helpful now. So I kind of rope in them, especially in the school holidays and on weekends to lend a hand. There's got to be some benefits having 4 kids, right?
A little bit of that. It doesn't work.
Bit of free labor in there, but yeah.
I do love, particularly, these T-shirts, specifically the one at the end of the cow. That's gold. I think you're going to see an order from Sydney for one of those sometime soon.
Well, I'm wearing the new one today. So we've got the B version too, which sort of, I don't know if you can see that.
I saw those on the site.
Because it matters. So yeah.
They're lovely. They're really awesome. I like there was a white one with a circular design on it as well. I saw on the website. They're lovely. They're really cool. Very cool.
Well, it's just a nice little memento too. People often taking a bottle of wine home, but we've tried to be a bit clever with the merch too, that it's not just like necessarily super obvious, TWR branding or whatever, that it's something that people, a message they might want to convey or that they're into. But yeah, the cow shit not bullshit one was definitely pretty popular.
Gold. Here's a shot of the cellar. Is having a cellar on site and a winemaking facility a feature of a lot of the Kiwi winemakers and wineries, or is a lot of contract stuff still going on?
It is in most parts of New Zealand. Probably not. Marlborough's a bit different. For us, it was a deal breaker. I think being both winemakers, we felt like having our own winery was crucial because we knew that, from our other experiences in Australia and overseas doing vintage, that often you've got to make compromises, perhaps because of the winery, because of how they're set up, or you don't have a batch to put, you've got to put two things together and you can't keep them separate, even though you want to, because you don't have small tanks or whatnot. So yeah, the winery, I guess, was a real deal breaker for us for how we want to do things, of having, you know, those very little tanks that you can see in that picture there, being able to keep every vineyard batch separate. But there's actually only about, and I might get this wrong, let's say there's about 40 wineries in Marlborough, actual wineries. So there's a number of quite large producers who do a lot of contract winemaking. And then you've got the sort of smaller, medium-sized producers that have their own facility, like, you know, Mahi, Huia, Spy Valley, us, Dog Point, you know, people like that. So, but then there'd be a plethora of labels, especially that you see in the Aussie market, that are, you know, own brand stuff and whatnot. But yeah, it's there's not as many wineries. I think there's probably maybe 150 wine companies in Marlborough, but yeah, like I said, only about 40 actual winemaking facilities. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Anna, let's talk about Te Whare Ra Gewurztraminer 2020, which picked up a gold medal at the 2021 Global Fine Wine Challenge, which used to be the Six Nations Wine Challenge, and we rebranded last year to Global, considering we didn't run one the year before just because of COVID. Notice how we haven't even discussed COVID yet, and I don't intend to start.
It's good. Yeah.
So this wine, we've seen, we were saying just before we started the interview, from your recollection, from my memory, Te Whare Ra has been part of an iteration of this challenge, the Tri-Nations, the Five Nations, the Six Nations, now the Global, since we started in 2003, and I think you're similar time. So I cannot remember a time where Te Whare Ra was not part of this. So that speaks volumes in terms of status and ongoing highest quality. I mean, Bob Campbell, who's the New Zealand representative judge, clearly loves Te Whare Ra, and we love Bob. So if Bob says it's good, then it's good. So here's the 2020, which picked up the gold. I'm going to pop up on the screen some of the reviews that we had for this wine, and obviously the 2021 challenge. We couldn't fly the judges in, so we used a panel of masters of wine that were based in Australia. And here's the comments. Just a few of the comments. This is Alison Eiserman, who's Master of Wine with us. Intense Mandarin, musk and tropical aromas, soft and fruity with fresh acidity, balancing residual sweetness. A beautiful long finish of rose and Mandarin flavors, 95 points. I mean, sounds delicious. I think who we got here? Andrea Pritzker, Master of Wine as well. Fragrant lychee, rose petal aromas, sweet and intense, but balanced with bright acidity. Long finish with great persistence, 95 points. So some glowing results there. And of course, it was really good to have independent judges that weren't part of the selection process. So it's always good to see that great wines remain great wines, irrespective of who's tasting them. Now, this wine in particular, Anna, I've got some notes here. It's produced solely from 14 rows in the old block, and planted in 1979, some of the oldest vines in Marlborough. So the Gewurz is from that very old block? The original block?
It's from the original planting here. So actually, Te Whare Ra is one of I mean, we have the oldest vines, but we're also one of the oldest wineries. So really it was the second or third sort of winery established here. And I guess one that's remained, you know, in that brand and in that place and whatnot, whereas others have had, you know, various different ownership changes or rebranded or whatever. So that was one of the things we loved about this property, was the old vineyard, because I think we'd worked a lot with old vineyards in South Australia. And just for me, they don't necessarily make better quality wine, they make more interesting wine. You know, it's a bit like people. You've been around the traps a bit, you've got a bit of life experience, you got a few good stories, you've got a bit of depth, you've coped with a few tough things. That's why we love old vines. And it was something quite unique about this property in a sea of kind of shiny, but a bit samey. You know, that was one of the things we really, and the Gewurz is kind of the original. It's the first sort of flagship wine for the winery. It's won multiple trophies and awards over its time. I mean, this might be a big call. I think it's potentially the most awarded single vineyard white wine in New Zealand, you know, just for that consistency of kind of still making it. The vines haven't been pulled out. They haven't been changed for anything else from what I've been able to establish anyway. But yeah, so 1979, they're not very big croppers, unfortunately. So not an accountant's wine, but an utterly delicious wine. And I think it just shows, you know, how well suited New Zealand is, or how Marlborough is, to growing these other things. You know, all the things that are great for Sauvignon, those long sunshine hours, the nice cool nights, you know, they're just great for other aromatic whites. So, yeah.
Tell us about your future plans for Te Whare Ra. What's in the wings?
I don't know, mate. That's a very different story than if you'd asked me, who knows? I don't even make plans anymore. I literally operate basically day to day because, I think for us, it's just about, we really set out. And when you were saying about that recognition thing and how long, our wines have been in the competition, that's what we set out to do. We knew we were never going to be the biggest. We're well behind in that race, but we just really want to be one of the best. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning. So I think it's just about getting better at what we do, incrementally improving things. We want it to be one of those brands that people trust. And even if they've fallen in love with our Gewurztraminer, they might try one of our other wines as well because they love what we do and find that they love that. So it's nothing, I think it's probably, evolution for us, not revolution. Wait and see yet if one of the girls wants to take it on. No pressure. There is 4 of them, so hopefully at least somebody's kind of interested in the wine game. But I think it's my adopted home very much, but I'm a hugely passionate advocate for this region and everything that's great about it. And I think the message needs to get put out there that Marlborough is not just a big, Sauvignon engine. Like there's a lot of really great high-end producers here doing some really, really cool stuff. And so I feel like it's kind of like there's this version of Marlborough and there's this version of Marlborough, and they're quite different agenda, different thing. We're just going to keep going this way with these people.
That's what you're doing,
so, yeah.
Anna, if you went in wine, what would your career path have been?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, might have stayed in hospo. I loved working in hospo. I just like people. I liked the fact that no day's ever the same. It's probably the same thing I like about this job. When I was 15, I thought I wanted to be a vet. So that was probably I love animals as well. But obviously, winemakers get pretty messy, but vets get a lot messier. And one day we were helping my dad on the farm, and I've seen some stuff, and maybe I was like, maybe I don't want to be a vet anymore. So, but probably if I done, it definitely would have been something science related, probably, because I just love science. I find it eternally interesting. So,
Fantastic. And what's your favorite wine memory? Is it a bottle? Is it a trip? Is it a dinner? Is it something that you shared? Is it a travel? What's that favorite wine memory?
To be honest, my earliest wine memory, I guess I got interested in wine because my family were all interested in it, like I said, and they were growers and, those kind of things. I still remember a wine that I was allowed to have, because if I was at my grandparents' house for dinner, we were allowed to have a very, small glass or taste of whatever the adults were having. And my uncle used to be a viticulturist for Wynns, and so it was a Wynns Shiraz, I think, but goodness knows what vintage. I was about 12, so work the maths out. But I just still remember how amazing it was and thinking, I was 12 or 13. I was like, that is, holy cow, that's good, or that's different, or it's just really delicious. And I think that's wine's main function, is to be delicious. But the fact that I still remember that wine some 30 something years later is that for me is an important memory, because my family is kind of what brought me to wine, even though it was kind of that family plus I love science kind of thing but I never, when I left high school, I never thought I'd be a winemaker. Hadn't even thought about it as a career option. So
And tell me, when it's harvest time and everything's crazy busy and you put the phone in your pocket and you put your earphones in and you hit play, what are you hitting play on? What are we listening to? What kind of music are you into?
I have fairly eclectic taste in music, and unfortunately at the moment, my teenagers love music too, so I guess I kind of get into sometimes stuff that they introduce me to. So I'm a bit of a diehard 660 fan, so big Kiwi band. Obviously, they're hopefully, I think, fingers and toes crossed, meant to be doing an Aussie tour this year, so I would urge everybody, because I kind of like chilled out music, especially if it's been a crazy day at work. Although I am a little bit guilty of the sing-song in the car by myself. I might have to belt out a few Adele songs in the car if I'm on the car on my own. But thank God the windows are up and no one can hear me, because I'm really not good at singing. But vintage time, we kind of let everyone have a bit of a crack. Everyone's got their own little Spotify playlist we might put up. But 660 in general, love them. Massive fan. Think they're amazing.
660. All right, I'll look out for them. I must confess I don't know them, but I'll definitely look them up shortly.
Or actually, I should give a plug. My cousin's in a band called Bad Dreams, kind of Aussie. They're an Aussie band.
Okay.
Been featured on Triple J and stuff. And they actually, my proudest moment for him is they opened for Midnight Oil. So I was
wow.
That's freaking legendary status. So yeah.
Are they based in South Australia as well?
He is based in Victoria now, and the guys are a little bit all over the place. So yeah, they kind of do. They tour all over Australia. But yeah, Bad Dreams for my cousin Alexander.
Bad Dreams, 660. Check it out. And let's put a wrap on. Where do we find these wines in Australia and in New Zealand? And I mean, we're a global entity here. So in the States, in Canada, I'm assuming you have distributors in all of those countries?
Pretty much, yeah. We export to 15 different countries now besides New Zealand, so that's pretty amazing for a little winery. So we do tend to be fairly on-premise centric. So, you know, in your favorite restaurant or whatever is a lot of, we sell about 80% of our wine through restaurants.
Yep.
And otherwise it's kind of like small independent retail. So it'd be your little favorite wine shop around the corner that's got the really interesting mix is probably where we fit. So in the States, we only sell in California. The wines are in Canada. Sometimes we're kind of all over Southeast Asia. So Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, mainland China. And then in Europe, we sell in Germany and Denmark and Spain and Hungary and the Czech Republic now as well. So, yeah. And then obviously, you know, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. So, yeah.
So the summary there is wine-searcher.com and punch in Te Whare Ra and see where your local merchants are, because they're all over the place. I know that we can buy this in Australia, and I highly recommend that you're getting onto both the Gewurz and my favorite, the Riesling D. So, yeah, great wines. Anna, thank you so much for joining us from Marlborough. It's just before beer o'clock there, nearly 5 o'clock, I think.
Yeah, I've got my glass here ready to go. So, yeah, it's 4:37 here, so it's definitely 1 o'clock.
Yeah, how boring is that? Anna, don't go away. I'm just going to wrap up the interview, but thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on your achievements with the Gewurztraminer, and we look forward to talking with you again later on in the year.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's it, everyone, for episode number 2 of the Global Fine Wine video and podcast series. Thanks for joining us. I hope you found this interview interesting, educational, entertaining. I certainly enjoyed having a chat with Anna. Please check out or have a look for Te Whare Ra wines. Get onto their website. Get onto wine-searcher.com and have a search for these wines. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. Please stay tuned for future episodes. We have another broadcast going out shortly where we'll be talking to Palmara Estate from the Barossa Valley. Until next time, stay safe.